Good evening, everyone. Hi, this is Sherry Sims, founder of Black Career Women's Network, and thank you for tuning in for tonight's Career Smart conversation with both of the founders of Beneath Beneath the Facade. I can't even get it right. So we're so excited to have this conversation. And tonight, the conversation is going to be about strategies to cope with microaggressions in the workplace. This is something that we all have experienced at various times in our careers. And these two ladies, the founders of Beneath the Facade, are really what I consider experts in this because they have done a lot of research around the psychological things that happen to us in terms of dealing with microaggressions and bias in the workplace. So we're so excited to have them on. And we're going to start with Danielle Dickens. She's going to be live here in our Facebook Live with us tonight. And then we have Veronica Womack, which is going to be live with us. And she's actually going to be engaging with the viewers within the actual Facebook comments section. So you're going to see her interacting with you guys through that. And then Danielle's going to be live with us here with the video for tonight's conversation. So I'm so excited about this conversation. We're going to have some good dialogue. For those of you who are not familiar with how to use this, it's just like watching Facebook and putting your comments in. We'll show them live, posting up on our screen. And we're just going to have a nice, good conversation tonight and chop up about this microaggression issue. That's something we all have dealt with in various times. And Danielle and Veronica both are going to share with us coping strategies and ways to recognize when you are experiencing a microaggression and how to actually deal with it, how to handle it. So look at this, ladies. We already got comments. Look at this. Glad to be able to join y'all. Always a timely talk. And hi, Irene. Thank you for joining. And then here we go, Veronica. She's going to actually be talking to you guys directly from the Beneath the Facade page. So she's saying, hi, everybody. It's Veronica. So glad you're here. And so we're going to go ahead and have Danielle share more about who she is along with Veronica so we can understand who they are. Peyton says hello. Look at that, girl. Everybody's ready to rock and roll, okay? And we'll let her tell you a little bit more about who she is and who Veronica is before we get started with the conversation. So Danielle, take it away.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for having us. My name is Danielle Dickens. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at Spelman College. And I teach courses on psychology of women, psychology of racism, and research methods in psychology. And my research focuses on the experiences of Black womanhood, particularly in academia, and also the unique experiences of Black women in the workplace, and particularly how Black women experience discrimination and cope with experiences of discrimination, particularly by engaging in identity shifting, which we'll talk about later on in the conversation. And so Veronica, Dr. Veronica Womack is at the Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine, and she's a research associate. And she also does very similar research looking at coping strategies among Black women, and she does research on mindfulness. And so how we met each other is that we met at a psychology conference. And so my dissertation topic was on experiences of discrimination among early career Black women. Okay. And so when I went into my graduate program, I started off doing research on HIV and AIDS in the Black community, which was a passion of mine. And then for me, transitioning I went to Spelman for undergrad, and then I went to graduate school in Colorado. And so for me, it was a culture shock and adjustment of being at a HBCU for women and then going to a predominantly white institution. And so I found myself having to navigate that space as the only Black woman in my department, in my program. And so I didn't know the name at the time, but I began to shift my identities. And so I wanted to conduct research and looking at how are other early career Black women experiencing discrimination and how are they navigating their workplaces. And so I decided to do my dissertation on identity shifting among early career young Black women. And so I was presenting my research at a psychology conference. This was in 2014. And Veronica approached me after my presentation. She's like, I loved your talk, and I wonder if we can talk more about applying your research into helping Black women who are the token Black women in their workplace and helping them navigate through that space. And so we brainstormed and came up with Beneath the Facade, which was established in 2014. And it is a psychoeducational and digital community for Black women in navigating the workplace and dealing with stereotyping in the workplace, and also experiences of gendered racism, which is the intersection between racism and sexism. And so we also have sections on our website for labeling your experiences of terms, psychological terms and definitions, to give that power back to us so that we can be able to label our experiences. We also have coping strategies on how to cope with experiences of discrimination and other stressors. And so our website is beneaththefacade.org. And so we encourage you all to check it out. But just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, because I'm sure you all have a busy schedules, but we're excited to be here.
Yes, and so, you know, we're going to be sharing how you can find Danielle and Veronica later on at the end of tonight's webcast, along with their website and everything. So still, we've got comments coming in. Hi, Regina. Regina's, she is viewing in from Florida. She's saying, good evening, beautiful champions. Makita Matthews, she is our director, our Columbus director, over in Columbus, Ohio, and she is on with us, and she actually leads up the BCWN Columbus chapter. So welcome, Makita. And then we have Nicole. Nicole is always watching ours. She's such a big supporter. She always watches our videos. So she's saying being the only is not fun, challenging. And she says, hashtag ask me how I know. So one of the things we want to do tonight, which is a little bit different than what we have done in the past on our live videos, is that if you have any aha moments or just anything that really is inspiring, you know, share that in the comments on Twitter, Facebook, and use the hashtag Black Career Women, and also hashtag Beneath the Facade, because all this is important for us to be able to share our knowledge and wisdom with each other. Looks like Veronica has put up, there is beneaththefacade.org, so you can find out a little bit more about both Danielle and Veronica and their research, what they shared, and being part of their community as well. And then Kimberly's waving, so we're waving back at you, Kimberly. All right. So let's jump right in. So, you know, I know there was a couple of bullet points that we said tonight that we wanted the women to learn about. And we said we'd have them learn about labels, you know, the experiences, understanding 4 coping strategies, and how to use those, and then learn about the associations between coping strategies and the health outcomes, which I'm so ready to talk about the health outcomes and the psychological impact that makes on us if we don't understand what we're experiencing. So let's just kind of jump right in. I'll have you take it from here in terms of, you know, what do you want to share first in terms of the learning the label experience? When it comes to microaggressions, let's talk specifically about what is a microaggression, give them the definition of what a microaggression is, and then what that looks like. And so, and then for those of you who are watching, if once she explains this to you and you're thinking, that's what that was, you know, share that with us in the comment box, because we really want you to get clear on what this is. And then, you know, there's going to be ways that you can respond to it. And, you know, Danielle and they're the experts tonight, and they'll be able to share that with you. So Danielle, explain to our viewers, what is microaggressions? What is that?
So microaggressions are subtle forms of discrimination. Particularly, they are everyday, subtle, verbal, nonverbal insults, invalidations of discrimination. And so, and it can be intentionally or unintentionally. But they have a huge impact. And so particularly an example may be that you speak very articulate for a Black woman. So they appear as compliments, but they have negative impacts. And oftentimes when they happen, you're kind of questioning, was that a compliment, or was that person throwing shade, or was that discrimination? And so it causes the person who's experiencing it to kind of question what just happened. And because they're so subtle, and they catch you kind of off guard. So oftentimes when they first happen, you may not know how to respond to it, which is typical. But there was kind of talking more about it on terms of some coping strategies in order to respond to those microaggressions. Another example that I experienced at a previous job is that a white female colleague asked me, how did I get the job? And so I kind of took that as she was asking me, who did you know to get this job? And so I told her, well, I found the job ad online, I applied for it, I got an interview, and that's how I got the position. And so oftentimes, once again, there are these subtle insults that can occur daily.
So Veronica, who is actually commentating from the actual comment page, she says, "You are so articulate, or a Black woman. Have you heard this one before?" And I have to comment on this. Veronica, I'm glad you brought this up, because I remember specifically, and this is not too long ago, probably about a year ago, and I am at a meet and greet event, and I was speaking to a lady. And part of this networking event was what we were supposed to, really share our elevator pitch with specific people. And the first thing that she said to me was, you speak so well. Like, and I'm thinking, what is that to say to me? Right? What do you mean by I speak so well? And I think, and I'm sure we're going to get into this about specifically the internalization that can happen from that if you don't understand who you are and what you bring to the table. So just want to give you guys an example of what that means, and that it can happen to you at any age, at any time. And it's all about how you want to respond to that. Veronica also says, was that shade or a compliment? Chances are high it was a microaggression.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
And then also, just to add to that, microaggressions can be influenced and impacted by your identities, right? So particularly if you think about race and gender, there's a lot of research looking at gendered racial microaggressions. So particularly, assuming that Black women are independent, or this idea of, as you mentioned before, you speak so well for a Black woman, that's more so an example of a gendered racial microaggression, because it's the intersection of both one's race and gender.
Okay, so you're saying that microaggressions can impact your identity, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so I've put that up on the screen, you guys, for a reason, so you guys can make note of that. Let's talk about this for just a moment as far as the identity part of it, Danielle. And I know you will be chiming in, Veronica, from our comments box as well. And so when it comes to the identity part, where do you feel that the internalization starts? We know it's an identity, but it's an insecurity thing, or is it really simply just they don't know who they are? And what can you do to increase what can you do to understand who you are? Because I'm big on knowing who you are as a professional, and we talk about that, and we do exercises to help people understand and get clear about who they are from a professional standpoint. What's your recommendation on getting clear about your identity so this will not impact you?
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to think about, what does your authentic self look like in the workplace? Sometimes we don't really think about that. Like, what do we value? How do we want to present ourselves in the workplace? Even though we can't be, how we are at home, we can't be that same way at work. But if it's something that is important, it's a core sense of who we are, it's a core part of our identity, then we have to make sure that we are in spaces that celebrates those aspects and identities of ourselves. And so I think that even though people may be secure in who they are, sometimes it just hurts to experience those different forms of microaggressions, especially if, for instance, your racial and gender identities are an important part of who you are, your entire self. And if someone makes such a comment, it still may sting a little bit, even though you are secure in who you are. So I think that oftentimes, it stings a little bit more when you are the token or the only one within your given workspace, because then you're further isolated or excluded.
So do you think that the exclusion has a lot to do with that then, where you may feel it a little bit more because you are the only one? Do you feel like it comes from maybe feeling like you're unprotected, or you don't have a tribe around you to support that?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And then also,
Okay.
I think once you, and we'll kind of talk about it, but I think once you start, experiencing them, then you can go through one of the coping strategies of planning on how to respond to it if it were to happen again in the future.
Okay. So I know we only have an hour to cram a lot of stuff in, right? So we talked about can I impact your identity. So really honestly, one of the first coping strategies is identity shifting. Now, kind of break down what identity shifting is and how can someone create a shift in that, and what does that mean to someone who is listening and maybe challenged with experiencing a microaggression, and maybe it runs deep because we carry baggage too.
Right. That's true. That's a good point. So identity shifting, and people may be more familiar with code switching. And I would say
Mm-hmm.
code switching is an aspect of identity shifting. So identity shifting is the conscious or unconscious process of altering one's language, which is code switching, and one's behavior in order to prevent being a target of discrimination. So this idea that, for instance, you may alter the way that you talk, you may not be as direct so that you don't come across as being the aggressive Black woman, right? Or I may, if I'm going in for an interview, I may decide to wear my hair straight versus
Mm-hmm.
natural because I don't want them to perceive me in a particular way. So this is a type of anticipatory coping where you engage in these behaviors to prevent being a target of discrimination. Um,
I like it. Go ahead.
and so what we, particularly this the research I looked at and saw that there's both benefits and costs to it. That the benefits that it has helped, people advance in their careers, but there are also some costs associated with it that is just very taxing to have to consistently shift yourself in different spaces. And also it, could cause confusion in terms of your sense of self and your authentic self if you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly having to shift yourself in different spaces.
Now, did you find from some of your research and what you have done, you and Veronica, from your previous research, that is there a specific age demographic that does more identity shifting than another age demographic?
Mhm. So that's a great question. So I'm actually um, trying to work on that research right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is research out there on identity shifting, but I think it's still growing. And so
Mm-hmm.
the research study that I focused on looked at early career Black women, so Black women who were at least 5 years out of undergrad. And so from that research saw that they were engaging in identity shifting, though they didn't know that's what it was, but they
Right.
were engaging in it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that not based off of research, but informally in talking to more senior Black women in their careers, that either some just have mastered it or some have decided to resist that and not shift their identity. So I think that it's a case by case, but I think we do see it across the board where some people maybe feel more comfortable doing it and they don't see it as shifting. Or whereas other Black women may decide that I'm going to resist it and whatever I want to say whatever I want to say. So I think it really depends on the individual. Yeah.
So she's got a good point here, and I think just from my own experience, because we have all age groups of women who watch our who are participating in our events. So I remember starting identity switching very, very early on in my career. I mean, not even in my career, my very first job. I think now that I think back, I'm like, oh my goodness, I was doing it then, right? And now that I think back to all those years ago, we're not gonna say how long ago, but long ago. And I remember specifically when I had two of my coworkers who were white said they wanted me to go to a movie and to eat after work, and they wanted to go to the midnight show, Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'm like, what is that? I never heard of it before. So, and we went out to eat, and we went to go watch Rocky Horror Picture Show. And during dinner, they were like, "Well, Sherry, you're not really Black." And I'm thinking, what do you mean by I'm not Black? And last time I checked, I'm still Cocoa Brown up in here.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize specifically what they meant. But at the time, I could see where, I looked a certain way, I was speaking a certain way, and it was a little bit different than how I acted at home. And I knew that. And so I was shifting them, but didn't realize it. And a lot of you who are listening, you've done it subconsciously. You have done it. Specifically, if you recognize racism in the workplace, right? Okay, I'm talking too much. We're going to let the experts talk.
No, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And it's like I said, it's like you also engage in it so that you don't experience discrimination. So it's like, let me change the way I talk so that I don't stand out as much as I already am within this space.
Yeah. So Makita said, not only does code switching cause personal confusion, but also it's so tiring to try to be someone you're not. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. And I'm going to share this too. Now, I hardly ever share this, but it's so funny. My daughter was probably not even 5 or 6 years old when she said this to me. And I took her to work. It was like, bring your daughter to work day. Mm-hmm. And then on the way home, okay, we were in the car. And she says, Mom, how do you act like you, she says, why don't you act like you do at work at home? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, baby, what do you mean? And she said, she says, you're just so proper and so nice and all this at work. And I said, well, honey, because I have to be, Mm-hmm. And she says, you know what? I'm going to call you proper hood.
That's what it is.
She said, I'm going to call you proper hood. And when she said that, it was like, ding! I was like, you know what? I do, but for a young child to see the difference in their mother from work to home, it's like she said, and to say proper hood, I'm like, well, I'm not really, but then I could get what she's saying.
Yeah, right. That's what it is that we are. I think oftentimes we're socialized with how we're raised or how we see our parents or relatives or people on television, how we see other people do it. So we just kind of feel like, well, that's what we have to do too within, these different spaces.
So Veronica says it would be interesting to see if youth growing up in the Black Lives Matter movement will be less likely to identity shift. That is a really good question. Mm-hmm. And I think that causes for something we need to be putting on Twitter and everything else to get some feedback on that. And for those of you who are, who could be in that era who are watching right now, please do chime in because we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I think that was really, really good. Makita also says not also does code switching cause personal confusion, but also fatigue. Oh my gosh, it can get exhausting.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and think about it, we already have enough stress when it comes to the workloads that we deal with at work, right? The personalities, the cultural differences, all these things. Right. And you wonder why Friday at 5 p.m. we're running a happy hour.
Exactly. It's tiring. Yep, exactly.
Oh, okay. Courtney. Hi, Courtney. Thank you for joining us. Veronica says here, yes, code switching is exhausting. That's why you should use it with caution. Well, I do agree. She also says, I call it my telephone voice. Proper hood is too much. That's my daughter called me. That was my daughter calling me proper hood. But it was true. And so Courtney, thank you for participating and watching, Courtney. She says, I noticed that I do still code switch at work, but I do it a lot less in my current workplace. I'm sure that it's because I feel braver from the absolute refusal of one of my coworkers, also a Black woman, to submit to certain expectations. I'm direct, but she's very direct. She wears herself outside every day, and I feel like I have more power to be more fully myself because she is. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because that's powerful.
It is, right? I think if you see, other people that look like you within your workplace and you see that they are being more of their authentic self, then that allows you to feel more comfortable to do the same.
I so agree. And when I was in the majority of my HR career, it was just, I was always the only pretty much. Mm-hmm. And then when I left HR and went into doing career development for a nonprofit, I went to, pretty much having a majority of the staff, it was 50-50. Mm-hmm. And I had never worked with so many Black people in one space, but it was so much fun and I could be myself. Does it make sense? It was like we were cutting up and everything. And so it was refreshing to be able to bring that side of yourself to the workplace and know it was okay.
Yep, exactly. And that's how I feel now, being a professor at Spelman. Like, I feel like I'm able to be myself. And I noticed that and it was adjustment for me when I was teaching at predominantly white institutions to now teaching at HBCU. Like, my students required of me. Like, they were like, we want the real you. So they want to hear about my experiences as a Black woman navigating through academia, getting my PhD. So also, I love it too, working at an HBCU.
So Courtney says, again, my experience with my coworker makes diverse, equitable, and inclusive workspaces super urgent in my mind. I don't want to go to a place where I don't feel like I'm bringing myself after this. It's like, it's almost like once you go Black, you never go back, right?
Exactly. That's so true. So when I was in Colorado, I was like, after this, I need to be in a space that's more diverse because it's taxing. Definitely having to shift yourself in like every day, right? And
every day
at work, for me, it was also because the Black population in the city in Fort Collins was less than 2%. So I found I was shifting at work, and then I was shifting in these, other like social settings, and so it was taxing.
It was taxing. So hi, Felicia. Thank you for joining. She says, I've learned that it's important for us to bring our full selves to work, which is so true. To me, and I talked about this last night, there's no other way that we can help educate them on who we are in our culture and the differences, and respecting those differences, by being able to show up authentically. Kimberly says, have you ever thought that code switching gives others a false sense of authority, meaning they think they can talk to or act any way because you're so proper or nice? What's your thoughts on that, Danielle? Veronica?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think it happened. Right. I think that's a perfect example of a microaggression.
Yeah.
Where people feel like they can imitate, quote unquote, what it means or sounds like to be a Black woman, or using certain like dialect of like saying like, hey girl, and knowing that's not something how they typically talk. So I think that's a perfect example of a microaggression. And you're right. I think and I think in those certain spaces that we have to educate people when they do try to, talk in that specific way.
Yeah. And so, that's a good question, Kimberly, and thank you for bringing that up, because I do think that, again, it goes back to communicating with intention, with power.
Yep.
And helping them to recognize and standing up for yourself too, because if the perception's there, it's your responsibility to change that perception. It's your responsibility to open the dialogue up to where you can clear up that and have them and help educate them. We say we don't want to. We say we don't want to go to work and be able to and give them the Black culture 101, but sometimes we have to.
Right.
In certain instances. So Felicia says people need us to see and not us trying to be them. And then of course Linda says I need an HBCU work environment. All right, Linda. I can be around some Black folks. All right, and then Veronica says, let's talk about this. But I want to make sure we cover everything. So we're going to move on to the next coping strategy, Danielle, which is behavior disengagement.
Yes.
And I'm going to go ahead and write this up here so you guys can also. Oh my goodness, we had a time. Okay, you guys, I'm going to get to you. Hold on just a moment. So Makita says, I can attest to the fact that the times are changing. I think companies, what people bring to their authentic self, if they don't, you don't want to work there. I went to my last interview with my afro, talked about how I could not work for a company that did not have any D&I initiatives, talked about how I fight for diverse suppliers, and they love the authenticity. Needless to say, they offered me the position and I took it. It resulted in me being happy at work. I'm just me, not someone else. Okay, high five, Makita.
I love that. Exactly. It's so important. I think when we don't bring our authentic self, even to interviews, because sometimes we wait, right? We wait until, after we get the job or the position. But I think it's important to show them who you are in the interview. And if they don't accept you, then it's okay to find someone else. Like, just like they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think this is where the shift in power comes,
Yes.
right? And this is where understanding who you are as a professional, owning that, being confident in that is
Yes.
important, and knowing that we do have choices, we have options. If you are keeping yourself marketable in your industry, you
Right.
have options. And
Exactly.
so I just think that long gone are the days of I have to take this job or nothing else, right?
Mhm.
And it's not even about being educated. It's about, it's a whole, all, and so many other things that go along with just that.
Yes. It's also about valuing yourself and what
Hmm.
you bring to the table.
So we're going to go ahead and go and move into the behavioral disengagement. I don't think I'm going to be able to type all this on here without it being big. It's probably going to be a little small, but we'll get it on here. Disengagement. Now,
Okay.
share with us, with our viewers,
Mhm.
what does behavioral disengagement mean, and kind of just break this down for our viewers.
Yes. So this is behavioral disengagement is another type of coping strategy where individuals reduce their behavioral efforts to deal with the stressor. So it's the idea that you physically don't deal with the stressful situation at all. So for instance, if your boss is nitpicking at everything that you're doing, but you notice they're only doing it to you and not your other coworkers, then you may decide to say, I'm just not going to do anything. Like, it's nothing I can say that's going to change her behavior. So I'm just going to keep doing my work, right? Or this idea that you will stop working towards your goals because like you don't want to deal with the stressor. So for instance, if you strive to be in a leadership position or be a CEO of a company, but you realize that you're still, having to manage and deal with these glass ceilings and these different barriers, then you may decide like, I don't even want to have that goal anymore. I don't have to be the CEO. So you just physically kind of just not deal with the stressful situation at all. And so what we find, particularly within the research, that this actually leads to more perceived stress. So this is probably one of the least effective strategies of saying, I'm not going to deal with it at all physically.
So, in other words, you just give up,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
You
Yep.
just give up
Mhm.
instead of finding another way, or saying maybe I'm out. This may not be the place where I'm going to become the CEO, but maybe I can become the CEO somewhere else, and
Exactly.
then just kind of strategizing in that way. So we have some comments, of course. Girl, you guys are
I love
bringing it
it.
tonight. I'm loving it. Okay. So Felicia says, whenever we bring our authentic selves to work, we help to break down the normal barrier. As Miss Michelle Obama says, your goal each day is to be better than yourself, which is true.
Yep, exactly.
Linda says, like not speaking during meetings. Yeah, well, I mean, part of that, yeah. If you're not going to say anything and because you feel like I'm not going to be heard, you
Exactly.
agree? Hmm.
Or the comment is going to be, or question is going to be better received by another coworker.
Now, Cynthia, hi, Cynthia, welcome, and thank you for watching. She says, I feel like there's a double standard, and the work output that my non-Black coworkers get away with is discouraging. They know I bring it, but accept my non-Black coworkers' behavior as okay. How many times has this happened? It
Exactly.
still happens. I mean,
Right.
it happened to someone today at work.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And then Veronica, of course, chimes in and says exactly. And then we've got, is it Gorisha? I hope I'm saying that right. Welcome. Thank you for watching tonight. She says, Felicia White, interesting you mentioned Michelle Obama because she and her husband code switched a lot. In fact, her image was majorly revamped from the campaign trail to when they first entered the White House. Okay, now let's open the dialogue up. Okay. So she's talking about Michelle Obama code switching,
Yeah.
and let's talk about this, right? I mean, now the White House is the White House, but what's your thoughts about that?
I think that, as I mentioned before, there's benefits and there's cost to it. And I think that unfortunately in certain spaces we do have to shift in some ways. But I think that because of the psychological costs associated with shifting, I think that we shouldn't shift core parts of who we are. And I think that though Michelle Obama may have code switched in certain spaces, I think we still receive the general sense of who she is as a Black woman. Like I think she wore those identities proud. And so I think we still were able to kind of tell who she is and what's important to her, even though she did, shift in certain spaces.
And then here's kind of my analogy on that too. Like you said, in a position like that,
Yep.
right? We're talking about leader of the free world. You are the first lady of the U.S. and as a Black culture,
yeah,
we know we know how to get with it, right?
Yes.
But it necessarily you are representing a melting pot of nationalities and differences and all of these things. Yeah. So you do have to kind of keep that even keel, right? But in our culture, we know behind closed doors, we know Michelle don't play, right?
Came out and we like, okay, we know how she.
Yeah, we know Michelle don't play. We know that Veronica got swagger. You know what I'm saying? We know they can bring it. And so I think it's just I think at the same time, had they showed up and maybe showed a little bit more of that in that culture, it doesn't necessarily mean it would have been the right thing to do. We may have looked at them like, why are you doing it? If that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes, like I wrote about this in a paper that I did looking at, I wrote about Insecure. And the character Rashida, I think it was from season 1, and how she didn't code switch in the workplace, and she was a lawyer. And so, then you can tell like the other, I can't think of her name right now, the other Black woman character actually questioned her, was like, are you okay? Are you doing fine? And so it eventually what happened was they ended up firing Rashida because she didn't code switch. Like they weren't comfortable with her within that given space.
Right.
So I think there are more costs associated with shifting, there are some benefits to it too as well.
Yeah, I think it's a you have to, again, it depends. Like even being a CEO of a corporation, or we'll just use Ursula Burns, for example. We know that she was able to be her authentic self, but I'm sure that she had a certain level of behavior and mannerisms and things that she wanted people to perceive her as. And so she probably didn't take it to, you can look at Ursula and tell she can bring it too, right? Yes. But she, I'm sure again, it was still, she put it into context. Being able to use that. And I remember, and I don't know if they could be watching or not, but I remember specifically when we had Evoke Life, we did a video with them a couple of years back, and one of the professors said, you know what? She's like, that little hood girl is always gonna be there, and I'll bring her out if when necessary.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
She said, I'll bring her out in the workplace when necessary. And I think you have to do that. Makita said all presidents and first ladies probably had to code switch. I think it's a positioning thing, not a Black woman thing. Oh, absolutely, Makita, you're absolutely right about that. Delphine, go ahead, Danielle.
I was just say, I think everyone has to code switch in certain spaces. But what I found in my research that due to the history and the unique experiences of Black Americans here, and then the marginalized or the double jeopardy of being both Black and a woman, that Black women may have to shift a little bit more because
right. And so Delphine, well, thank you for watching. She says, as a person of Caribbean descent, code switching took on a whole other meaning. With African American, white, Hispanic colleagues, my tone, posture, boundaries, comfortability, it all changes depending on who I am. Besides, I'm not going to pretend that I don't like hip hop and country music. Hey, it is what it is.
Yes.
Yep. And she brings up a good point. You think about, the other nationalities. There's a payroll like, which is a video. I mean, they have this big video channel on YouTube, and they're all Latino channels. So they have a video out there about what code switching looks like at work. Yes. And they're all Latino. It's like, okay, we do the same thing. Yes. So other nationalities, Latino, Asian, all of them, they also code switch in their own way. Right. And it'd be great to kind of hear some of their coping mechanisms too and what they do.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
All right. And then Delphine says, I didn't need POTUS or FLOTUS to speak Ebonics for me to believe that they're at the core of who they are for they're 100 for their culture. Exactly.
Right. We already know.
We already know, right? So, which is so smart. And
Yeah.
then Jorika says, also there's something to be able, she said, also there's something to be able to be said for being able to be your authentic self while also being professional and adapting to your workplace environment. There's a balance that needs to be had.
I
Absolutely.
love it. And that's
And
exactly, yeah.
and talk about that. Break that down a little bit about the workplace culture, because we could talk about that for a while.
I know. So I definitely agree with that. And I think that once again, you have to kind of figure out what do you value, and what does your authentic self look like in the workplace. Like if you like hip hop and country music, it's okay to mention that, with your coworkers. Instead of, sometimes I think we hide certain parts of our identity because we are, afraid of confirming certain stereotypes. But I think that particularly a lot of research has shown that one particular study by Thomas and colleagues in 2014 saw, like, what are the top stressors for Black women in the workplace. And so
Mm-hmm.
they saw that it was, being hired and promoted, lack of mentorship, code switching was stressful, coping with experiences of discrimination. So those were some of the top stressors for Black women in terms of their experiences in the workplace.
Wow. Wow. See, you guys getting some heavy hitting information here tonight. And that's good. And so I want to make sure, because we're getting close to our time, I want to make sure that we still touch base on the last two that we have. And so let's move into um, the next one, which is not disengagement, because we just finished with that one. But it's going to be emotional debriefing.
Yeah.
Okay. So explain to us explain this to us. Kind of educate us on what is this emotional briefing? What does it mean?
Yes, so it's somewhat similar to behavioral disengagement, but this is the idea that you emotionally distance yourself from the environmental stressors. So this is where you maybe attempt to forget about the situation, you minimize the negativity of the situation, or you also just go through the phases of venting, or processing the stressful incidents with mentors, your tribe, or friends or family. Um,
Okay.
so an example of this would be if you were giving a presentation and then afterwards your, white male coworker runs up to you and say that you speak so well, and, giving this microaggression, and then you may decide to, vent to your girlfriend after work about what happened, a friend that maybe is going to make you laugh about the situation to help you forget about it. So this is actually one of the most common strategies that Black women use is this emotional debriefing. So venting or forgetting about the situation, or, talking about the situation with family or friends or coworkers.
Okay. All right. So this makes a lot of sense. And so now, do you feel like, I know sometimes there were experiences that I've had in the past where I felt like I couldn't talk to a family member or even specifically some of my friends about it.
Yeah.
So, viewers, have you experienced that before? Is
Yeah.
anyone going through something like this right now where you feel isolated and where you're not able to get what you need? And two, what should they do in this instance? Where should they go, or who should they reach out to?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that I felt that at times, when I was in Colorado, because I think it was a unique place, and being
Mm-hmm.
the only one in my department, and my family and friends were supportive. But I think that, it's hard to, I think, really understand what that experience is like if you're not in that particular situation or environment. And so what I
Okay.
found is helpful is that to find, to create your own community within that space, I think is helpful. So, it may not be people that look like you, or just understanding that, finding people or tribes that will understand your experiences. So for me, luckily I did find a community of, other people of color, of Black women, and even some white women, and other people of color who understood my experiences. And so that was helpful in terms of how to navigate that unique space. But then also, even though I know it's difficult, as I mentioned before with the research, but finding, mentors. And even though you may not have a mentor that's particularly within your institution or your company, they may be somewhere else, but they also have experience what you've experienced as well. So I think it's just finding people, particularly if you can, that's in your field, that have an understanding of what you might be going through or experiencing.
Yeah, I think it's important. Again, you hear people talk about mentors and sponsors all the time, but what's nice and unique about a mentor specifically, or the purpose too, is to be able to. They can also be an outlet for those conversations.
Exactly.
You
Yep.
know, and even if if you feel like you're not, they're not there to really help you to grow, but you need a sounding board somewhere.
Right.
This is part of why BCWN is here, to be that sounding board for you too, or a place where you can be heard. So
Right.
you need to find those outlets. I agree with you. Find those outlets. You've got a community beneath the beneath the facade. You've got a community with BCWN. For those of you who may be feeling that, you've got a place where you can go. So we got a couple of comments here. Felicia says, last time I was told I gave a great presentation or was told I spoke well, I responded by asking, what about my presentation of speech made it great by the person, white male, who asked? Of course, sometimes you have to make them challenge them to think deeper, because
Exactly.
they may not think they're doing any harm. It's that whole, they don't have to walk around and think about these things because of the privilege that, or
And
how things have been set up for them.
exactly. And that is a way to respond to microaggressions, is by putting the question back on the person. Like, well, what did you
I
think
agree.
about that? Like, explain that a little bit more. So it puts the onus back on them. But yeah, I saw that Veronica made a good point in terms of the psychological outcomes associated with emotional debriefing. So we see that there are mixed findings, that some research has shown that it has more positive psychological outcomes, but some research also shows that it could in some ways lead to more anxiety or depression of, venting. So
Wow.
it's kind of mixed findings in terms of the outcomes associated with that particular coping strategy.
So do you think that it possibly leading to anxiety and depression, do you think it comes from the lack of identity of knowing yourself, or the confidence, or where do you think that comes from, allowing it to get to that space? Or maybe is it back to the, like you said, maybe hurting of the feelings, or
Yeah, I think some of it potentially could be that. I think sometimes if you constantly think about the situation, like I think it's okay to, once it happens, to vent, let it out, whether it be to a mentor or someone else. But I think when you constantly think about that situation
mm-hmm.
over a period of time, then that's when it could potentially lead to these harmful effects. So I think it could be that it could be related to, you know, not being secure in who you are, or that it hit a core part of your sense of identity. But I think sometimes when we tend to stay on certain topics, or it's hard to like kind of forget about it, then I think we may see those negative outcomes.
Okay, so I put that up here because I think that's an important part, is say vent,
Yes.
let it out,
Yes.
vent and let it out.
Yes.
And you have to do that. There was an incident, my daughter experienced microaggressions in her very first job she's in now, and by a young white male. And when she told me about what happened, I was so infuriated. I mean, I was like, I am like calling corporate headquarters.
Yes.
I'm sending emails. I'm sending letters. We're calling EEO. They don't, and I was all over. And she was just like, I mean, it didn't faze her because she's like, she knows who she is. But for me, I was on fire. And the guy eventually, she vented to her friends and to some of her coworkers, and let it out. And I heard it. I was like, she let it out. And then eventually he got fired. They did an investigation on him, and then found out other stuff he was doing, and he got fired.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to, but you do have to have a great, strong sense of self to not allow yourself to get to that place. Well, at least that's what I think.
Yeah.
But vent, let it out, ladies.
Exactly. And then also, I'm a strong advocate of seeking therapy. And when I was in Colorado and experiencing the gendered racism on a daily basis, it was great to vent to, coworkers or mentors, but I realized that it was having an effect on me. And so by seeking out therapy and seeing a therapist, they were able to help me and confirm that it's not anything wrong with me, because we do, you may tend to internalize if you're experiencing those microaggressions daily. So I found that that was helpful for me in terms of trying not to internalize really the beliefs and issues that other people have, but they were kind of putting on me. So that was really helpful as well.
Well, I like what Veronica just said about, she liked Felicia's response, but she said, put the question back on the person. It's not our responsibility to provide an explanation for the confusion about our existence. And that is a very powerful statement, Veronica. Thank you. I think it's important that we understand that the problem is not us. They have the problem of understanding who we are, and we need to stop thinking that we have done something wrong.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So Nicole says, so what would the prevailing advice be regarding how one can effectively / professionally address microaggression? The answer is clearly not running from the issue, i.e. constantly job hopping to escape the problem. Every single workplace on earth will always have some kind of issue. So what's the winning strategy to counter it?
Yes, so that is a kind of segues into the next coping strategy, which is planning. And so planning involves coming up with action strategies. So we find that this is a very effective coping strategy. It has a lot of positive outcomes. And so when you are dealing with these experience of microaggressions or discrimination in the workplace, it's important to come up with a strategy, and you can do that in different ways, right? So as someone mentioned before, of asking a question back on them, or for me, sometimes if I experience something and I don't know how to handle it, then I go to my mentor and say, this happened. What are your suggestions on how to respond to this person, right? So going to someone who's more senior and knows the political culture of an environment is one particular strategy. And then also, so I think that, and sometimes you may have to do role playing, right? So if microaggression happens and you're talking over with someone on how to respond, so that the next time it happens you have a response for it. Because sometimes I think that's how it has a negative effect, because you may not know how to respond to it, and then time has passed and you're like, now it's too late. I have a response now, but now it's too late. So then you have to wait until it happens again. So I think just having a strategy and a plan. But for me, what I found is that what has been successful in creating that strategy is reaching out to mentors, more senior people, to hear their thoughts and advice, because they've been through it for a longer period of time than I have. And so now I kind of have these comebacks for when, microaggressions occur, because I receive, mentorship from other people.
Yeah, and I like that. And again, Cynthia says that having a mentor is so key. Veronica says, what are your practices to not internalize negative gender, racial microaggressions? Just things to ponder. Yeah. Felicia just said it's not just a black and white thing either. She recently showed a black female a photo of herself and an Hispanic subordinate, and she asked if he was her boss, and she said, she was his boss. So, and I know, and let's break this down because we still have a little bit of time left. I know it said 5 minutes, but I just want to go just a little bit longer. Okay. You guys are okay with that? So let's talk about that, because the whole piece when it's us, right? Because Felicia brings up a good point, the perception that we have of each other in the workplace.
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit. Did you have any findings in your research based on, when we're working with each other?
Yeah, I think sometimes, and it's not a lot of research, but sometimes it's actually more hurtful when you are discriminated against other people that look like you. And so there's not a lot of research out there, but there is some that actually could be more detrimental, because maybe you don't expect to experience discrimination or microaggressions from other Black people or other Black women or Black men. And so when you do, I think in some ways it can be more devastating than experience it from someone who's non-Black, because it's something that maybe you don't expect to experience it from someone that looks like you.
No, this is true. I do agree with that. So Veronica from the Facebook comments is sharing with us. She said there's also a few books about microaggressions. Everyday Microaggressions by Daryl Wings too is one of them. He's a counseling psychologist.
Yes.
So this is good. So go ahead.
Another book that I wanted to mention, if you're really interested in code switching, is called Shifting the Double Lives of Black Women. And it's by Jones and Shorter Gooden. I think it was published in the early 2000s, but it's a phenomenal book if you're really interested in hearing more about code switching, and not just in the workplace, but then also in other settings as well.
So let's give a kind of a rundown of some other tips. I know we gave them the 4 coping strategies, and we're going to go back and give them those 4 coping strategies again. I'm going to go ahead and list them again. The first one is identity shifting. You know, and what's the main takeaway for that for our viewers?
So the main takeaway for that is that there should be a balance with identity shifting, recognizing that there are benefits and costs, but one shouldn't feel like they have to shift their complete self within the workplace, that it should be a balance.
Okay. And our next one is disengagement. We're just going to put disengagement.
Disengagement. So I would refrain from doing that one if you can, just because of the negative long-term effects of it, that it may feel good in that moment to remove yourself from the situation, but it has negative long-term effects.
Okay. And then our next one is emotional debriefing.
As we mentioned before, get it out, vent, it's okay, but try not to harbor on the situation. So if you vent, get it out, but don't think about the situation over a long period of time, because then that could potentially lead to more anxiety or more depression or depressive symptoms related to the stressful situation.
So vent, get it out, ladies. Get it out. Vent and get it out. You know, I don't care if you got to go boxing. You know, if your kid has Grand Theft Auto and where you can go in and beat up the cops in the video, just get it out. Just get it out. You know, and I don't say it that way, but you know, some video games can allow you to get out that aggression. You know, it's true. It's true. Okay, and then the last one is planning, right, or creating a strategy.
Yes. And so that's an effective strategy. And so just plan, right? Create an action plan.
Okay, so let's create an action plan, you guys. I'll go ahead and just add that just so you guys will know, create an action plan. And so what are some of the things that you all do, you and Veronica, with Beneath the Facade, that help women to deal with this? Like, what kind of, do you do events? Do you do workshops? What are some of the things that you all do within your website or community that can help women to overcome some of these microaggressions, identifying with all these other things?
Yeah, so our website, we have a platform of different resources. So we actually have a long list of various types of other coping strategies, because there's several of them on the website. So we give the term, the definition, and tips for if you want to engage in that specific coping strategy. Also, as I mentioned before, the idea of labeling your experience. So we have, because I believe, as I mentioned, there's so much power in being able to it kind of gives you back some of the control of being able to label or to name your experience. So we have that there. Also, we have done what's called BF chats. So Beneath the Facade chats, where we have different topics and we do like conference calls and we talk about, identity shifting, code switching. And so we've done that. We also are working on doing workshops. So we're excited we're preparing to do diversity trainings for institutions, for employers, on implicit biases, or how to create an inclusive workplace culture, or how to, even for employees, how to notice and respond to microaggressions. So those are some things that we want to continue to do in the future. And We also have been working on some research projects. So we just did an article that's published in the Journal of Vocational Behavior, looking at the experiences of being the token Black woman. So hopefully when we have that link, we would love to share it with your viewers. And we're also conducting research looking at stereotyping and impacts of coping strategies on physical and mental health among Black women.
Yeah, and I love this. And Peyton says this session was much needed as I'm starting a new assignment on Thursday, and I'm tired of not being my authentic self in the workplace. And I think so, Peyton. I hope this was really, really good for you. And Veronica says we have in-person group chats with ladies in Chicago, Atlanta, and DC.
Yes.
And then this is where their website is, so you guys can find that. I really think that the older you get, the more you just don't give a hoot anymore.
Right.
And I'm talking from experience, and I think as you get, as you do tend to become more mature and older, you tend to be like, you know what, I'm not, no.
Yeah.
You take or leave it. But I think there's something empowering about being younger and being able to recognize it and show up the way you need to. And again, for me, it's all about really changing the narrative. And I talked about this last night. This is about changing the narrative. And we are in a great position to change the narrative about how we're perceived, showing people that the stereotypes that you see through the media and things like that are not who we are. And so I think right now we're in a good place to show up the way we need to show up and be our true selves, because we're bringing so much more of this information to light.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're seeing in social media, that more people are, being their authentic self. And that's why I got really interested in Veronica and I in, this research and Beneath the Facade, because we felt like there wasn't a lot of research about the experiences of early career young Black women. So
right.
See these phenomenal, senior Black women in their career that have this senior status, but it's like, well, how did you get there? And so, and the unique experiences that, young early career Black women are dealing with. So that's why we created this space for all Black women, but particularly thinking about these young early career Black women.
Right, because I think that they probably code much more than others do.
Yes, yep.
Nothing doesn't happen in the other ones, but I just know for myself that I code switched so much more when I was younger than I do, or have in the past 20 years. So I get that. I just told my age, but that's all right. So, but it's true. And so, it's about being able to embrace who you are from any age and showing up authentically. And if you have natural hair, don't straighten and go to the interview like that. Like Makita says, she went with in her afro and got it. So, and at the end of the day, you do have Caucasians who are leaders in a lot of these organizations who can respect that and like it, right? They may not know how to communicate and share their admiration for that, because they're like careful what they say, but there are a lot of them who do like want you to show up like that, who love our natural hair, who enjoy those things about our culture in a way that they don't know how to express, or they may be uncomfortable to express it themselves too.
Exactly.
So Makita says, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. I remember when I was in Colorado, I kind of got to the point where it's like, I'm going to talk about my experiences as a Black woman. They're going to know what it means to experience both this gendered racism. And so what I found is that I didn't realize this, but my, white and other non-Black colleagues were learning. When I just shared about my experiences, I was open about my identities and what it means to be a Black woman. I didn't realize it, but they were learning from me just being open and my authentic self.
Yeah. So there's a couple of comments in here that I think we need to touch on. So I'm going to go back a couple of comments, and I'm going to start with Felicia's comment. Okay. So Felicia says, this is all examples and reasons for why it's important for us to be our true selves in the workplace. There's no work me and home me. It's just me. And that's who I have to be. When others see an example of a natural hair wearing, boardroom leading, cowboy boot and bow tie wearing Black woman who drinks whiskey, need to wash it down collard greens, then perceived norms are broken down and a new norm can be established.
I love it. That's all of it. All of that and more. Yes.
Look, Felicia. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, the reason why I'm showing that is now Nicole has a response to that.
Mm-hmm.
And Nicole's response is, I can understand your point, and well said, by the way, but I disagree about trying to push for a new norm. Your responsibility is to do your job in the way your employer wants you to do it. If they don't want employees wearing cowboy boots, it's really not your place to try and defy that by wearing them anyways, hoping your employer will come around. Sometimes folks who bring their home selves to work also bring their home drama, which is unacceptable. I've seen it. There does need to be a separation of two selves to a certain extent. I'm sorry, I had to look. This is good conversation. I had to show the difference.
It is. So I think I'll go back to my previous comment that there needs to be a balance. But I think that if wearing cowboy boots is an important part of your core sense of identity, and you want to wear it, I think that, unless there's a very strict dress code in terms of what you can only wear within a given space, a workplace, then that's understandable if it's very strict. But I think that there does need to be a balance, but I think that people should, once again, figure out what is their authentic self in the workplace, right? And I think that and that your authentic self can equate to being professional, because sometimes we don't think that it is, but it is, right? And so it's just finding that, I think that nice and that good balance.
Yeah, and I think too, both of them have a great point. And again, it does go back to creating a balance, right? Yeah. So I'm in a space now where there's a guy, he comes to work and he has 2 full sleeves, right? Tattoos. Mm-hmm. And he wears a little short sleeve golf shirt, and his tattoos are just very visible, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's an RN. Mm. When I found out what he did, I was like, cool. Because you would look at him and wouldn't think he was a nurse, right?
Yeah.
And so, but in his space, it's okay for him to be even an RN and being able to show his full sleeves of tattoos and wearing a short sleeve golf shirt. Mm-hmm. So, that is allowing him, that his workplace is allowing him to bring his authentic self by them being lenient on that dress code or that the visibility of his tattoos. Right. So I think it is about using common sense. Mm-hmm. But also too, if you have an employer who is allowing you to kind of have that quirkiness about you and they respect that, you're going to get your work done. This is about you being able to be comfortable with that. Because if you're not doing your work, you're not going to be there long anyway.
Exactly. And I think people need to feel a sense of belonging. Like all humans, we have to feel a sense of belonging, especially within the workplace, right?
Yeah. If you think that is an extension of the relationships and the camaraderie that we have outside of when we spend more time at work than we do at home, if you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're not happy at work, then
you spend 8 hours at work.
Yep.
You get home, you may have lucky to get 4 hours of me time or 4 hours of whatever time in the evening, because you're in the bed by 10, 11, 12, whatever. Yeah. And then you're back at it again. And then you have 48 hours to yourself where you get to do anything you want. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're not talking 2 days. I'm breaking it down in real time. You have 48 hours to be off to yourself. Yeah. You got to go back and spend.
Exactly. Right. So it's important to find that space or find what that looks like for you within your workplace.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Veronica and Danielle, please let our viewers know where they can find you all on social media individually and also with Beneath the Facade.
Yes. So with Beneath the Facade, we're on Twitter, which is Beneath Facade. And then our Facebook page is Beneath the Facade. Okay, I need to do better. I'm only on Facebook. I'm working on Twitter. So once I get that, I'll let you know. So those are our Beneath the Facade handles.
Okay, so Beneath the Facade on Facebook and
Yeah.
Twitter.
So Beneath
Okay.
the Facade on Facebook, and then Twitter is just Beneath Facade.
Okay. All right. So you guys, that's where you can find them. What do you guys have coming up next? Anything coming up next?
Yeah, well, we're just right now we have a article that we're about to publish, but we're working on a few things. We have some book ideas in mind, so we love to share that with you all once we have that. But we don't have anything set in stone right now. But there's some things that we're working on.
And by the way, Veronica came to our conference last year.
Mm.
She was there, and I was like, "Oh my God, you mean you got you were at the conference last year?" Which
Yeah.
I think is awesome that she traveled from Chicago and came to our conference last year. So, and had a great time. So we thank her for her support and being able to attend. So, we love what you guys are doing. I know I love what you guys are doing, and I think that this is definitely a much needed conversation, and we definitely need to continue this and think about some other ways that we can expand on this conversation we had tonight and do take it to another level.
Yeah.
So we'd love to be able to talk about that even further of what we can partner and do with that. All right, so this has been such an awesome conversation. Before I wrap it up with a few words about BCWN, Danielle, any last words from you? Veronica, within the Facebook comment section, any last words from either one of you?
So just want to say it's an honor for having us on this platform. So thank you so much. And we look forward to building this collaboration with you. And I also just want people to know that, you may be the only Black woman in your workplace, but just know that you're not alone, that
yes,
we also have these shared experiences, and that it's important to vent and to get it out. And so now you have, of course, Black Career Women's Network, but then Beneath the Facade. And then also, major takeaway home is to find your authentic self in your workplace and what that looks like.
And here's the thing, women, Black women, I remember when I had this revelation, when I realized, you mean there's other Black women like me who've been going through this mess and I never knew about it? And I was not alone in this process. Well, my gosh, I got to do something about that. And then, that was part of my revelation too, of saying, what, I got to do something about this. And so, and as groups like yours and others that are out there building things to help us to understand that we are a tribe, we're a nation within ourselves in terms of being able to come into the workplace. And employers are starting to get it. They're starting to understand the value in the differences in a different way, where D&I is just not D&I. It's about let's really understand the differences and how can we again change the narrative, and that's part of our responsibility to do that. Exactly. All right, so I thank you. Veronica says our take home points: you're not alone. Find your authentic self in the workplace. Absolutely. Yes. And the conversation is not going to stop here. We're going to continue to keep having these types of conversations, so we'll let you know the importance of why we do what we do. Right, Danielle? This is why we do what we do, because we love our sisters. Yes. We want you guys to emerge and be what the best that you can be within the workplace, and loving what you do and get paid for it and not have to drive yourself crazy. Exactly. Right. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end this with you guys know where to find us at blackcareerwomensnetwork.com, or should I say bcwnetwork.com, where you can find us. We are going to be doing another Career Smart conversation next month. We try to do these once a month. I'm trying to get so better at making sure we do this more often. So next month's career conversation will be with Tanya Sessions, and she is also a career strategy professional, and she's going to be talking to us about career reinvention, which is something we don't talk about a lot, right? Because we go through these different stages in our career, and sometimes when we desire more or we want to change careers and we're burnt out and we don't know how to take our skills and transform and do something different. Right. So we're going to be talking about career reinvention and what that really means from an emotional standpoint, physical standpoint, and a lot of other areas that we don't really talk about when it comes to career reinvention. So I'm excited about having Tanya on next month for that Career Smart conversation. So I'm going to leave you guys with this. The life God gave you is larger than the life you've been living, which means that God gives us all special gifts. And it is your job to discover what those gifts are and use those to work in your purpose. Okay. Remember that. Discover your strengths and work in your purpose. So you know where to find me at Twitter at BCW Network CEO. And you can also find me at the same handle on Instagram. And then, BCW is all over the place. You know how to find us. So until next time, you guys, enjoy the rest of your work week. I hope it's well. Take some of these tips that Danielle and Veronica has given you tonight and put them to good use. And we will see you next month on the next segment of Career Smart Conversations. Good night. Danielle, stay on the line.